So the question is go digital or go offset. And actually what started this whole presentation a number of years ago was a printer was interviewing for a graduate that would be able to decide when should we go digital and when should we go offset. That was going to be part of their job. And so I recognized that we needed to define this in a little bit better way. So I went in and did some estimating, and I used the Franklin catalog. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that. But it's just a tool, and I basically did it for a duplicator on the top. I'm pointing with my hand, that doesn't work too well, so I'm going to use my cursor. I did it for a duplicator, I did it for a digital press, and I did it for a large offset press. You can actually see there are some numbers in here. It's a little too dark for your screen. Mine's all right. But you can see the numbers that are there on your handout. And nobody ever in their right mind would do 100 copies on a 40-inch press. First of all, it wouldn't make sense. This is basically a 1117 4-page newsletter is what I estimated for color. That's what I went through the process. And I did it for 100, for 500, for 1,000, for 2,000, 5,000, 2550, and 10,000. Okay, so I'm pricing it in different ways. And so what you're going to see on the next couple of slides is sort of breaking it down. But I broke it down just again here, that the duplicator, we had the paper cost, the total duplicator cost, the per piece for the duplicator of what it costs per piece. If you were doing 100, it's $5.45 per piece to do it. And then the duplicator time, it was very short. If you look at the digital, again, we have the digital per piece price. Why? Because that's the way we price it. There's a click that you pay the company, and then you also figure out your own click cost. Anybody in here do BHRs? Okay, so I'm working with Ideal Alliance, used to be an APL, and they merged and all that. And when you're doing it on a digital press, you actually find your internal, instead of your BHR, it's your digital click cost. So your internal, so it's a budgeted click cost. And so that's all wrapped together into one price there as far as what it costs. And so to do one, it costs basically about 13 cents to do one of those. That's the internal and external cost. I'm not going to go through all of these slides in much detail. I just want you to understand where all of this came from in the beginning. And then I did the same thing down here, which is basically the same thing as a duplicator. But if we just look on the other side, on the duplicator, it gets down to basically 15.79 cents per piece when you're running 100,000. If you look at what the per piece cost is for doing it on a duplicator, it's basically lower than it was when you're only doing 100, but it's still not very low. The base cost stays pretty constant, and you'll see that on the graphs in a minute. So if we go to this is the cost versus the digital offset. So I took away some of the extra stuff that was on the previous slide. You can see again the two extremes, the digital press, the total cost is going to be $132. And you can see that as we look at the end over here that the cost per price is going up substantially, or per piece is going up substantially. So these graphs hopefully will spell it out a little bit better. Again, it's a 4-page newsletter, 4/4. If you look at the green line is large offset press. Again, if I was going to print 100, my make ready of my plates, getting the job in register, set up sheets of paper that are needed to get it set up, it's going to cost me almost $12,000 to get all of that done. I'm sorry, $12 per piece, not 12,000. I was looking at the numbers on my computer. But it's going to cost $12 per piece to do it. As soon as I print 2 pieces, it's $6 a piece. As soon as I print 4 pieces, because I'm spreading the make ready charge over multiple pieces. And so that's the advantage of a large offset press is, as the press run gets longer, the price per piece. If you look down at the end, the green and the blue lines converge. And there's not a really big difference between a duplicator and an offset press. Big difference between, and this is a 4-color duplicator, not a 1-color duplicator 4 times through. But the big difference between the duplicator and the large 40-inch press is, on the next slide, is how long it takes to do it. Okay, so this is production cost. And the next one is how long it takes. So on this one, the production cost, you can see on the red line is the digital press, it goes up. So your production costs keep going up at a very steady pace, but your production costs go down per piece when you're running a longer run on an large offset press or a digital. And again, it's because your make-ready cost was the initial cost that made it cost so much, and then you had to break it down from there. So all of that being said, now again we're looking at runtime. So this is where the duplicator versus the large offset press. The large offset press is green, the digital duplicator is blue. Okay, we know that they're priced very close to the same at the end of the job, even for $100,000. But the difference is one is going to finish in a very short period of time, or the other one's going to take almost a day. So the reality that you have to be focusing on here is that you have to define out where is the point and where does it make a difference. Specifically, the reasons for this is, again, this goes back to your setup costs, your plates, chemicals, rags, press time that you need for the offset press. And digital is the cost of the toner and the clip cost. That's the main thing. It's built into the higher per piece cost. So what's interesting is the first Indigo was at print 95. And everybody joked about that in the beginning because they said you had to have two of them, so one was always working. And at that point in time, the break-even point of running digital or running offset was about 500 sheets to 2,000. And there's a pretty big range, because if I'm putting a digital Indigo press against a GTO Speedmaster, I'm going to get one shift. If I'm putting it against a 40-inch press, I'm going to get a different shift. So it was, in 1995, it was 500 to 2,000. That was the range. It is still the same range today. Why? Digital presses are getting better, more economical per sheet. No question, they've been improving every single year. Heidelberg just introduced a new press. It won't be here at the show, but they introduced a new press that is really close to a lights-out press, that it will literally run virtually all by itself. It's not a skilled operator anymore, the mechanics that keep the machine running. But for the last, it was interesting, I was watching, reading something that another faculty member wrote, that from 2000 to 2014, the offset lithography market has lost 40% of its volume. It's still 40% of everything that's printed in the world today is printed by an offset press. It's still the biggest single printing process out there. And so you have to recognize that that's there. Well, it hasn't been sitting idle for the last 14 years or 15 years. It's continued to make improvements. It has automated plate mounting systems. It does everything faster. It does everything better. When I started 40 years ago, a make-ready time on a 40-inch press was typically an hour and a half. Make-ready time on a 40-inch press today is between 5 and 10 minutes, depending upon the press that you buy and the skill of your operators. So those are the things that are doing this. Also, when you start looking at speed in production, a Heidelberg 102 Speedmaster, an 8-color Perfector, which means it's 4/4, it's going to be 18,000 impressions an hour, and it runs 18,000 an hour, 16 up, there's 8 on one side, 8 on the other, it's perfecting, it's running through. That's 288, 8.5 by 11 pages per minute. Pretty hard for a digital press to compete against that. Now, inkjet, high-speed inkjet printing, that's going to be able to do it at some point in time. In the next 5 years, I think you're really going to see an amazing growth in that, and it's going to continue to change. Let's go to the next level up, the Gloss 3000. Okay, Gloss 3000, also called a Sunday press. It's 64 pages up. It's 32 on one side, 32 on the other. You actually do it with 2 webs. But it's printing 64 pages. It's 100,000 impressions an hour times 64 pages. That's basically 6,400,000 8.5 by 11 pages. I don't even believe that high-speed inkjet's going to reach that one. And so is offset going to be around for a while? Yes. Okay. What are the advantages of offset? It's more cost-effective. Digital. Advantages of digital. It's more cost-effective at short runs, no arguments. If I'm doing variable data, there's no question I'm going digital. I remember sitting in a room one time, and on campus with our designers, and we were working on a project for one of our student classes, and the designer said, we were running this job for our dean, and we were running a digital, and the woman says, well, we found that if we have a run that's over 2,000, we always go with an offset. And I said, well, the problem with this, and we were running almost 5,000 cards, postcards, and I said, the problem with this is it's not a run of 3,000, it's a run of 3,000 times, because it was a variable data piece, and she had no concept and she didn't follow what was going on. So again, part of it goes back to education to make sure people understand that. Overruns and underruns, if you don't teach the business side of estimating, overruns and underruns are a big part of what you do with them. If you put 10,000 sheets of paper and you're supposed to deliver 10,000 and you screw up 250, what happens? Okay, and you can get to the suggested terms and conditions of sales, which NPL and PIA make a booklets available on how to deal with that. But the bottom is, you don't have to worry about that on a digital press. If you screw up 10, you print 10 more. And you know you screwed them up, you count how many you screwed up, and you fix it, and you take care of it. Low-cost setups. It doesn't cost a lot to get to set up and just run one and see what it looks like. It's required if you're trying to create variable data, as I said, much quicker turnaround in and out. And you're typically proofing on the output device. So those are really big advantages of digital. As far as offset goes, it's a higher quality image. Now, I would have to sit here and say there are some digital presses that are really truly approaching offset quality. I would put the Indigo press pretty darn close with a 50 power glass. You put a dot on it, and I actually would argue that the dot's better. Why? If you don't know enough about it, spend some time at their booth. But the ink is applied to a blanket, it's dried on the blanket, and it's a perfect circle on the blanket. Then it's laminated to the sheet of paper. And so on an offset plate, you've got ink that goes to the paper, no matter, even if it's a coated sheet, it's still going to have a little feathering on the dot. So I would even argue in some situations that digital is even better sometimes. But the reality of it is higher quality as a general rule. Why? Because we're imaging with a plate setter that might have 4,000 DPIs on the output device. And we don't have anything close to that on the digital devices, so you can create a much cleaner, sharper image, especially when you're getting resolution issues. You have a much wider range of substrates, textures, colors, and thicknesses that you can run through. There are a lot of ink colors and types and various uses. You can go up and see the Indigo upstairs. There are a few other machines that have a 5th color. You can have up to 7 colors, but it's not a quick change. It's not as easy to change colors on one of those presses as it is to change colors on an offset press, and you have pretty much an unlimited one. You get a 6-color press, you can keep changing your colors and adding all sorts of things. It's a much lower price per piece as long as the quantity goes up. And then larger sheets can also reduce the binding time, because most of your digital presses are printing basically a 4-page folder, and then if you want to put them together, you collate a section out. They can do that in line, which is a plus. So we'll see that on another slide here. But the problem that you've got when you're looking at that as far as the digital goes is that you have to deal with your bindery. If I am going to take it offline with bindery. Almost every Indigo that I've seen is offline finishing. They don't do a lot of inline finishing on Indigos. If you take it offline and you run it through, you're going to have to run more sheets through the folder rather than one big sheet that makes one pass through the folder and makes 3 folds. So there's a lot of different things that are going on when you're looking at your choices. Other issues, digital tends to crack and scuff. Not as big an issue with inkjet. Again, inkjet is the future of digital. They are pretty much maxing out the speed to the machine on dry toner-based systems. But the speed, the quality is coming up, both quality and speed coming up on wide format inkjet. And I'm talking about for sheets and booklets, not posters and banners. And then you can adjust the CEO of the print surface on an offset press. You can put additives into your ink to change the CFO. I was talking with my students about dog food bags that have very low CFO on it. They're stacked in a big pile. Yet when you grab that M&M bag in the grocery store when you're getting ready to leave the checkout, you pull out an M&M bag. Another one's supposed to slide down. There's very low COF. And they do that on purpose. Could you imagine if we printed the same ink on the dog food bags and somebody went down the dog food aisle and just bumped one pile of the dog food? Like everything would fall into the aisle. And you can do that on an offset press, you can't do that on digital prints. Design considerations, registration concerns, sheet to sheet and front to back, optional colors and color management, overprints. These are just all issues that you have to start looking, pluses, minuses between each one. Other issues that are involved here is there's less maintenance on digital devices. In other words, less daily maintenance that a person would do, but you're also going to have more frequent service calls. Most people get to know the names of the kids, the service people for the digital presses and things like that. They're in there a lot. Check out for paper adhesion and color on digital presses. It's a tape test. You literally print it, put the taste on it, let it sit for an hour, pull it off. And on most digital presses, it comes off pretty easy. On an offset press, after an hour, it's pretty good. Wait 24 hours, it's not coming off. So those are pluses and minuses, depending on how you're looking at it. Trapping's going to be very different between digital and offset. Your color gamut's going to be different because of that. Avoid black overprints and check out rich black impact. If you do a rich black on an offset press where you put a 45% cyan dot underneath the black to give you a dark one, you do that same thing in digital, you've hurt the black. Black on digital is blacker black than it is on offset. So you learn to do these things. Just as a plug for GCEA, that's Graphic Communications Education Association. We've got regionals and regional EPs, and the goal is to have them do some presentations. So I created a PowerPoint presentation on design for digital, which would fit right into this. Imaging compression issues. It has a lot to do with understanding PDFs and what you're doing right, and what's the best format on almost every digital press. A standard PDF is going to work fine. You're just throwing away resolution, or you're throwing away memory if you go to a print version. But we do that on an offset press. Why? Because we have a high-end plate setter that's going to give you a much better, much cleaner, sharper image. Avoid trapping in variable images. That's not an issue, obviously, because we're not going to do variable on an offset press. But then working in RGB where you make your conversion, and different philosophies seem to be working in different places on offset and digital. Font size may be an issue on some devices. Some Xerox can go down to 2-point type, some Xerox devices, but not all digital presses do that well with that. The last couple of slides are probably super significant, and I only have another minute or two left, but the point that I want to make, and this is one which again will take a little bit to study, but I want you to understand, up at the top, the revenue that the company is, what you're looking at is the revenue, 70% of the revenue comes from offset. So this is their total for a year. This was a study that was done by Kodak, and they went to multiple companies. And these companies, printers were going out, the owners of the companies were going out and seeing the digital press wasn't running. If you see an offset press that's not running that full 40 hours a week, you're losing money. And the print owners would know that. The digital press, though, is not like that, because you're charging much more per sheet, and it's not going to run all the time. And so there's this transition in understanding the difference. And what this whole thing does, and you'll see as I get to the bottom of it, but the point is that in this particular company, 70% of their businesses, 70% of their year-end revenue came from offset. 97% of the pages came from offset. 22% of their revenue came from digital, 3% of the pages from digital, and 8% of their revenue came from their mailing and fulfillment. We would just call it an ancillary service. The point that comes down to the bottom here, and you see the circle that came up at the bottom, is the profit that they were making on the digital was 29.6% profit. And if you can make 29.6% profit because of the markup, then you're going to be able to do it. Here's the bottom line, and the last thing that you need to know. You need to be preaching and teaching to your students if they go out. You cannot sell digital like you sell offset. You cannot sell it as a commodity. Offset printing has become a commodity. And yes, we're very efficient, we're really good at long runs, but there's overcapacity there. Digital press gives us all these advantages for shorter runs and to deliver it sooner and quicker and faster. That being said, you have to make sure that people learn to start thinking like a marketing person and sell digital. Don't just give it away like they do offset printing. Thank you.